Hey everybody, welcome back to another deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at something pretty cool. I think the connection between how we move our hands and how we speak, it's really fascinating stuff. We're going to be diving into a study from 2002 by these researchers, Treffner and Peter, and let me tell you, it gets a little wild in here.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried tapping your fingers to a beat while you're talking?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out there's actually all more going on in our brains than we realize when we do that. and get this, left-handers and right-handers might even be doing things a bit differently from each other.
Oh, wow.
But before we get too far into that, I think it'd be great to get you to kind of break down this research for us.
Yeah. So Treffner and Peter were really interested in this idea of coordination and specifically how our brains handle the challenge of coordinating our speech with finger movements.
Okay.
So in their study, they had people repeat a simple syllable like bah while tapping their fingers along to a metronome. And they'd slowly increase the speed of the metronome to see how people adjusted, just, kind of push the limits of how well people could keep up.
So they're making things progressively harder.
Exactly.
Okay. And what were they hoping to find by doing this?
Well, they were measuring something called relative phase, which is basically the timing relationship between the peak of your finger tap and the peak jaw movement when you say bah.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like trying to pinpoint the exact moment your finger hits the table compared to when your jaw is, at its lowest point while saying bah.
I see.
And they wanted to see how stable that coordination was, especially as the pace picked up.
That makes sense, yeah.
Right.
But, reading through this study, I gotta say, there's this whole P center thing that really caught my eye.
The P center.
Yeah, what is that all about?
Yeah, the P center. This is where it gets really interesting. Think about when you're, clapping along to music.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily syncing your claps to the very beginning of each note, are you?
Right, you're syncing to the beat, yeah.
Exactly, you're syncing to the beat. So the P center is kind of like that beat in speech.
Okay.
It's a point in the syllable that your brain kind of focuses on for timing, but it doesn't always perfectly match up with the actual start of the sound. It's more like a perceptual center.
So my brain is creating its own internal beat, even when I'm not even aware of it.
Exactly.
To help me coordinate my movements.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It is. Our brains are constantly striving for order and synchronization.
Yeah.
Even in these seemingly simple actions like speaking and tapping.
Yeah.
It's not just about reacting to sounds either. We're actually predicting and anticipating them, which is really what helps us stay coordinated.
Okay, so we've got this concept of the P center, our brain's kind of amazing ability to predict timing.
Right.
But you also mentioned earlier that there were some differences between how left-handers and right-handers handle all of this.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
So the study found some really subtle but important differences between the two groups.
Okay.
Both groups could coordinate their speech and tapping pretty well. But left-handers showed more variability when they had to tap and speak in kind of an alternating pattern, especially when they were using their left hand to tap.
So maybe being left-handed kind of adds another layer of complexity to how your brain has to handle coordination.
Yeah, it's possible.
But does that mean left-handed people are at a disadvantage then when it comes to coordinating movements?
Well, that's a great question. And it's something that researchers are still trying to figure out.
Okay.
It's not necessarily about disadvantage, but rather a different way of organizing these functions in the brain. Remember, handedness is linked to something called brain lateralization, which is how functions are kind of divided between the two hemispheres of the brain.
Right.
And this study seems to hint at a connection between that lateralization and how our coordination patterns work.
Okay, that's fascinating. So I guess we've established that even these, seemingly simple actions like talking and tapping actually involve a lot more brain power than we might think.
Absolutely.
But these researchers, they didn't stop there, right? They actually used some kind of mathematical model to try and explain all these patterns.
They did.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so they used what's called the asymmetric HKB equation.
The asymmetric HKB equation.
Now, don't worry, we won't get bogged down in all the math here.
Okay.
But what's important is that this model helps us understand why we might see these coordination differences. It considers a few key things.
Okay.
Like how our bodies are actually built. Like the jaw and the fingers move in different ways at different speeds.
Yeah.
And it considers how much attention we're paying to the task. Because let's face it, the harder something is to do, the more focus it takes to stay coordinated.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like when you're learning a new dance move, right? It feels impossible at first.
Oh, totally.
But with enough practice, it eventually starts to feel more automatic.
Yeah, so is this model saying that attention is like a key ingredient in how well we're able to coordinate our actions.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is that this idea of coordination connects to a much bigger question about the evolution of language.
Oh, wow. How so?
Well, there's this theory out there that language actually evolved from a system of gestures and hand movements.
Wait, so you're saying that way back when our ancestors might have been communicating with their hands before they were talking?
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's wild.
That it is.
Does this study link back to that idea at all?
Well, the researchers specifically chose to use the syllable ba in their study because of its P center.
Oh yeah, right. The brain's internal beat.
Exactly.
But how does that tie back to the evolution of language?
Well, if you think about it, if early communication was really reliant on hand gestures, having a strong sense of timing and coordination would have been absolutely essential for conveying meaning clearly.
Right. So everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the P center might actually be a vestige of that evolutionary past. This built-in timing mechanism that helped our ancestors synchronize their gestures and then eventually their speech.
I'm starting to see how this seemingly simple study about tapping and talking is actually touching on some pretty deep stuff about how our brains work and maybe even how language itself evolved.
It's like peeling back the layers of a really fascinating onion.
It really is.
And it highlights how interconnected our bodies and minds really are.
Yeah.
We're not just isolated brains floating around, we're physical beings.
Right.
Who interact with the world through movement.
Yeah.
And this research suggests that even our thoughts and language are deeply intertwined with that physicality.
So it's not just about tapping and talking. It's about understanding those fundamental principles of coordination that underlie pretty much everything we do.
Exactly.
Like from dancing to playing sports to even just having a conversation.
Precisely. All those things require this complex coordination of movements, perception, and timing. And the insights from this study, particularly the role of the P center and attention, can really help us understand how our brains are orchestrating all those actions.
This is making me think about how we learn new skills.
Yeah.
Is there a connection between this research and, say, like someone learning to play a musical instrument?
Oh, absolutely.
It seems like timing and coordination would be super important there too.
For sure. Learning any new skill, whether it's playing music, dancing, or even learning to walk, involves training your brain to coordinate movements in very specific ways.
Right.
And this study suggests that the P center, that internal beat, might actually play a crucial role in that learning process. As you practice, your brain gets better at predicting the timing, refining those movements, and making things feel more automatic.
So what you're saying is this research, which started out looking at something as basic as tapping and talking, could actually have implications for understanding how we learn and improve in all sorts of areas.
Absolutely. It suggests that by paying attention to timing, practicing consistently, and understanding our own internal rhythms, we can potentially enhance our ability to learn and master even really complex skills.
Well, that's amazing. It's like we're harnessing the power of our own internal coordination machine.
Exactly.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. I never would have imagined that something as simple as tapping my fingers and saying, could reveal so much about how our brains work and how we interact with the world.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It really makes you appreciate the incredible power and complexity of the human brain.
Yeah.
It really is amazing.
It does, and it's a good reminder that we're still learning so much about how the brain works, you know?
Yeah, it's like we've only just scratched the surface of understanding this whole coordination thing.
Right, and this study, it focused on a very specific action. Coordinating those finger taps with saying the syllable ba.
Right.
But the principles that they uncovered, things like the P center and the role of attention, those seem like they could apply to so many other things that we do.
Totally. Like think about playing a musical instrument.
Exactly.
Or playing sports or dancing, even just having a conversation.
All these activities require that complex interplay of movements and perception and timing.
And what's really exciting is that the insights from this study could potentially help us understand how we can actually improve in all these areas.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about understanding how our brains work.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge to enhance our abilities and our experiences.
Exactly. By becoming more aware of our own internal rhythms.
Yeah.
By practicing and refining our coordination, we can potentially unlock whole new levels of skill and performance.
Wow, this deep dive has definitely given me a whole new perspective on something I never really thought much about before.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's the beauty of science.
Yeah.
You know, it can really open our eyes to the wonders that are hidden in plain sight.
It really makes you wonder what other hidden connections are out there just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe some of those discoveries will come from those everyday actions and observations, you know, just like this study did.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive into the fascinating world of speech-hand coordination.
Yeah, but I hope this has sparked your curiosity and maybe inspired you to pay a little more attention to those amazing ways that your brain coordinates all your actions and your interactions with the world.
It really is amazing.
It is.
Remember, there's so much more to explore and learn about this incredible coordination machine that we call the brain.
So keep asking questions, keep experimenting, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.